Hi, and welcome to another episode of SWITCHCast, a podcast delving into the world of film brought to you by the team at Switch. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Charlie David Page.
I'm Jess Fenton.
I'm Daniel Lamon.
And I'm Jake Watt.
It's Thursday the 16th of November 2017.
On this week's show, I learn the tricks of the trade and make a dream come true as I get one step closer to becoming Charlize Theron when I enter Atomic Spy School with an actual MI6 agent.
We ask why we haven't seen a proper queer superhero yet in a major film.
And the dominoes just keep falling in Hollywood with Kevin Spacey, the latest to tumble. His name is now so toxic that Ridley Scott is flat out replacing him with just over a month before the release of All the Money in the World. We weigh in.
And as always, all our reviews and giveaways.
Let's get straight into it with Justice League, the latest team outing in the DC universe. Daniel risked life and limb to suss this one out for us, but surely it was better than Suicide Squad.
Well, any hope that the DC Extended Universe was starting to find its feet after the success of Wonder Woman drops into the deepest and dankest of pits with Justice League, a film that somehow manages to match Suicide Squad in its level of incompetent bullshit.
We're asking people we don't know to risk their lives.
Strong man is strongest alone. You ever heard that? That's not a saying. That's the opposite of what the saying is. Divided. We are not enough. The world needs Superman. I made him a promise. This is why I brought you together.
Ben Affleck's Batman has a feeling some bad aliens are coming now Henry Cavill's Superman is dead, so gets Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman to get some heroes together, blah blah blah. I'm bored just trying to work out what this stupid film was about. You don't care, and the film doesn't make any attempt to make you care. It's dumb and teenage boy juvenile screenplay matched in shocking mediocrity to how shitty the filmmaking is, stripping the film of all the visual scope and grandeur that made the other films at least watchable. The real spectacle is seeing the desperation in the eyes of the cast to be literally anywhere other than here, especially when dealing with the dialogue dripping with Joss Whedon's own particular type of immaturity and misogyny. It is a terrible film. I feel embarrassed for it that it even exists, especially after Wonder Woman. I was literally counting down the minutes till it was over. Don't even bother. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. I'm giving it 1 star. Alright, so to kick off the discussion with this film, I actually have a question for all of you guys. I want you all to tell me, what is your favourite thing about the DC Extended Universe films? And 2 rules: you can't be ironic, it has to be genuine, and it has to be post The Dark Knight. So, name some things you like about the DC films.
Amy Adams.
Amy Adams, good. Why Amy Adams? I mean, apart from her being Amy Adams.
No, that was it. That's mine. I don't know. I love the fact that they cast someone older than her screen partner.
Mm-hmm.
That someone of her age, just in general. I think she's an amazing Lois Lane. Well, it's not hard to pick up from the last one, which was Kate Bosworth. No, and also, yeah, just to say, she's Amy Adams. Come on. Hollywood in general, I just applaud the decision to cast her in that role.
Yeah, because I mean, it's true. It would have been a lot easier to cast someone who was, young and hot.
You could have gone a Jennifer Lawrence or an Emma Stone or a whatever, and they didn't. Amy Adams is very talented and she's beautiful, but she's seasoned. I'm not going to say long in the tooth because she's not, but you know what I mean. She's not. She's no slouch. She didn't come from Disney or Nickelodeon or and has a pop career on the side. And they literally could have picked anyone, and I applaud the fact that they picked her.
Do you think this is indicative of DC's casting decisions overall with the extended universe?
No.
There are a lot of age-appropriate women who were cast for Wonder Woman. That's at least one good thing. I mean, obviously Gal Gadot is not very old, but the elders who lived on their little island, the Amazonian women.
Yeah.
So like Robin Wright Penn in Wonder Woman as well was also...
Yeah, Robin Wright Penn in anything is great.
Robin Wright, people. She hasn't been penned for a while.
Oh, yeah, Robin Wright.
I never would have picked Robin Wright as this kind of, the mentor of Wonder Woman. Like, if you look at it, Robin Wright probably plays the biggest ass kicker in the DC universe so far. If you want to say Wonder Woman is like the best, Robin Wright is her mentor. So yeah, I never would have picked Robin Wright as being like, the ultimate badass of any superhero universe.
Look, the thing which I'm most excited about for Justice League is seeing Ezra Miller in a film again.
Well, yeah.
I really like him as an actor, but at the same time, I'm a little hesitant after what I've seen in the trailer of him. He just seems a bit irritating.
He's the comic relief.
Clearly. Which is, I mean, concerning considering he could be looking at having his own standalone film. So,
and what about for you, Jake? Is there anything that stuck out for you as a positive in the DC universe?
The first thing that sprung to mind was Jeremy Irons as kind of like a more action-orientated Alfred.
Kick-ass Alfred.
Yeah, he's like kind of the strategist, as well as like sort of being, pretty dryly witty.
You can find my full review at maketheswitch.com.au, and Justice League is in cinemas now.
Lucky is also out in cinemas today. Jake took a gamble on this film, so did it pay off for you?
Lucky is the directorial debut of a pretty great character actor, John Carroll Lynch, and the final film of all-time great character actor, Harry Dean Stanton, of Repo Man, Alien, and Cool Hand Luke fame. Lucky provides Stanton with just his second leading role in a feature film after 1984's Wim Wenders classic, Paris, Texas. Similar to the structure of Ginger Moosh's recent Patterson, the film depicts the everyday minutiae of the routine of Harry Dean Stanton's character Lucky over the course of several days. The 90-year-old man rises, does some quick yoga exercises, walks to the diner for some coffee, doing the crossword while there, buys milk and cigarettes from a local convenience store, heads back home to watch game shows, and eventually winds up at his favourite bar amongst other regulars. Suddenly, an incident with a coffee maker leads to a brush with his own mortality.
I got this anxiety attack. I fell.
Lucky fell down.
Let's not make a production out of it. I was scared to death. I started thinking there's nothing out there. It's all black. The void.
Most people don't get to where you are. They never get to the moment that you're in right now, where you have the ability to witness what you're going through and clearly examine it.
I know the truth, and the truth matters. And you have to face that and accept it.
There are some things in this universe, ladies and gentlemen, that are bigger than all of us. And a tortoise is one of them.
Harry Dean Stanton was a master of underplaying, and it's a pleasure just to watch him silently regard the world. John Carroll Lynch matches his leading man's nonchalant candor with simple, unadorned filmmaking. Lucky is not a film about action or events. It's a finely tuned character study, a slow film that establishes its premise and then goes nowhere. As final roles go, Lucky is a worthy swan song for Harry Dean Stanton. 4 out of 5.
The comparison to Patterson makes me excited to see this, apart from the fact that it's, the last film from Harry Dean Stanton and it's John Carroll Lynch, directing. Patterson was one of my favourite films of last year, so it was in my top 10. So just that recommendation alone, Jake, makes me actually quite excited to see this one.
Yeah. It kind of threads into that whole thing, like Jim Jarmusch is really good at doing that thing where it's like, these like quirky characters who live on the fringes of Americana, which I think is awesome. It was like a really popular kind of mini genre in the 90s. That's, my thing. And Lucky to me, Lucky is just like a kind of like a throwback to that kind of stuff. And, Harry Dean Stanton, man, like he's one of those actors as well, like actors with like really interesting faces. Harry Dean Stanton, like, already like an interesting looking dude. As an old man, you really can just like sort of just watch him process a scene without really talking, and it's awesome.
There's no artifice to any of his performances. Look at any of them, even if it's like a David Lynch, which is about as far into the art house world as you can get, to something like Alien, where there's no bullshit with Harry Dean Stanton's performances. And I think that's the reason why he was so endearing and so enduring, was that you got exactly what this man wanted you to get when he was on screen. It's quite beautiful, actually, that his last film after his death, the final film we'll get to see of him, is a film where he gets to be the center of attention. Because as with all great character actors, as with John Carroll Lynch even, a lot of the time we don't get to see them, blossom. We don't get to see them be. I actually didn't realize that Paris, Texas was the only other film he'd ever been the lead in. I just assumed that someone must have placed him in a lead performance at some point. And those slice of life kind of capturing moments as opposed to a strict narrative, that's a really hard thing to do. I mean, Jarmusch is one of the few people that can. It sounds like John Carroll Lynch has been able to do it with this, but it's one of those types of films that can either be very beautiful and very profound, like with a Jarmusch film, or it can actually be quite frustrating and annoying, like most films made by the French these days. The fact that this sounds like it's captured that with this actor at the center is quite exciting to hear.
I think character actors like John Carroll Lynch, to a degree, like they're outsiders themselves in terms of acting. Like they're kind of they're support actors. They exist on the fringe. So Like they really kind of get these kind of outsider movies. Stu Buscemi did a really good film called The Trees Lounge, which is the same type of deal. Like Stu Buscemi directs, he wrote it and acts in it as this guy who's kind of like a younger version of Lucky. And it's like a great movie. And Steve Buscemi, once again, like fantastic character actor. I couldn't name a movie where he's the lead off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I can't think of one either.
That takes nothing away from him as like sort of but the same deal. Like the guy's a fantastic actor. Lucky also has like a really great role for David Lynch, who plays. He plays like a regular in the bar who Lucky is consoling him when David Lynch's character's 100-year-old pet tortoise runs away and leaves him.
Does
he
like,
devastated.
Yell the whole time? Because I can only imagine David Lynch just going, "Hello, Albert!" That's all I can imagine him is just screaming at people because he can't hear them.
He'll move you to tears. Like his role, the way he just laments the gaping void the tortoise has left in his life. Is just, But this time it's not actually like a literal black hole to another dimension. It's just kind of like a metaphoric void.
It's nice. It's quite nice thinking that he's in Harry Dean Stanton's last film because of how close they both were.
Oh, fuck yeah. Well, like Harry Dean Stanton was in David Lynch's possibly his last piece of work. So... yeah, it's kind of nice. Their relationship is pretty cool. Anyway, Lucky is in cinemas now, and check out my full review at maketheswitch.com.au.
Also out today is The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Dr. Stephen Murphy, played by Colin Farrell, has a seemingly perfect life, a successful career, a beautiful wife, Anna, that's Nicole Kidman, and 2 adoring children, played by Raffi Cassidy and Sunny Suljic. Yet he's been keeping a secret from them. He's been meeting with a 16-year-old boy named Martin, played by Barry Keoghan, when Stephen's family becomes unconventionally ill. No tests at the hospital can determine what's wrong with them, but Anna starts to unravel Stephen's secrets, which may have brought deadly consequences to their entire family.
What a charming boy. How did his father die?
A surgeon never kills a patient. An anesthesiologist can kill a patient, but a surgeon never can.
They're gonna see us from outer space.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about Bob.
It's nothing serious.
No, it is.
Like we're the stars of the human race. Human race.
Where did you 2 go?
When the lights started out, they don't know what they heard. Strike the match, play it loud.
He's got issues. Serious psychological issues.
We'll be raising our hands.
Can you do something to put an end to all of this?
Sky, 'cause we got the fire.
Don't be scared, Mom. You'll see. You won't be able to move either.
This film is completely, utterly, wildly bizarre. If you've seen director and co-writer Yorgos Lanthimos' previous work, particularly The Lobster, you'll have an idea what you're in for tonally. The Killing of a Sacred Deer is confronting, with every shot and every word of dialogue designed to build tension. The performances are stunning and congruent, with everybody on board for this very unconventional style. While Farrell and Kidman are predictably superb, Barry Keoghan steals the spotlight in every single scene. His portrayal is deliberate and disturbing, and is the highlight of an exceptional cast. It's really best going into The Killing of a Sacred Deer knowing as little about it as possible, so all I'm willing to reveal is that it is a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. Unsettling from the get-go, it will shock you in the most unexpected of ways. This is another outlandish offering from a director unafraid to cross lines and toy with taboos. The Killing of a Sacred Deer is truly the best kind of barbarous cinema. I'm giving it 4 stars.
Yeah, I've seen this film, and it should be said, it's a film that won't be for everyone.
Oh, God, no.
As Charlie said before, going into it, I was so grateful that I had seen The Lobster beforehand, so I knew what I was entering into. Having said that, before I saw The Lobster, I'd never seen a movie by this man before.
Seen The Lobster before you'd seen The Lobster.
Going, what the fuck am I watching? Yeah, when you get to the end of these films, I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce this man's name, but when you get to the end of his films, I do enjoy them. I do like them. I cannot tell you why, but they are so bizarre and fascinating to watch.
They're also incredibly funny. Like, that's one thing that you forget about Killing of a Sacred Deer, is that it's an incredibly funny film. Mostly because everything is so detached, and because you feel like you're watching characters who are incapable of connecting with one another because of Lathimos's very particular style, which is the same in The Lobster as well. You get stuck in that weird space between knowing, am I supposed to laugh? Am I not supposed to laugh? And the more the film goes, you start to realize, oh no, this film wants me to laugh at this whilst also being horrified. It's the most beautiful balancing act.
Yeah, it feels like the kind of humor is almost very sadistic. Like it's just something which is, it's a little bit unsettling in the way it doles out its humor. I think this one's probably a little bit harder to digest than The Lobster. I think there are themes in this one which are a little bit more difficult, especially when you get to the film's climax. By that stage, you're pretty much like gripping the edge of your seat quite literally.
It doesn't wait for you. I mean, the Lobster doesn't either, but The Lobster has to take its time to explain some very complex narrative plot points, while Killing of a Sacred Deer is able to just kind of, because it's based on a Greek myth, it's able to just do what all great myths do, which is just deliver to you a bunch of narrative points and then just go for it. It always feels like it's 2 or 3 steps ahead of you in the best possible way. It's incredibly Kubrickian. It's probably the most Kubrickian film I've seen in a long time, the one that emulates that sense of the camera being a detached observer, the fact that the film is a tone unto itself, the fact that the mechanics of the narrative are so slight and that the visuals are telling you so much more. Watching the film, I got the feeling like I was like a peeping Tom on this story. Like the camera was my perspective. There's a lot of shots where...
I was just going to say that, yeah.
There's a lot of shots where the camera is angled, is from a position which is not natural for a camera to be positioned. Like you're looking at people walking away from you, but from a low angle looking up. It's almost shot in a fisheye lens kind of way. It's placing the audience as a participant within the narrative as opposed to simply just a detached observer. And the film refuses to tell you how to feel about it.
It's not just the angles too, it's the framing as well. Like so often you won't have the conventional cinematic framing that you're used to and having people neatly positioned in frames. You'll have them right off to the side of one frame, or you'll have half of the screen full of headroom. And that kind of adds to that whole observational thing. Like you're peering into this world and it's something you're not meant to be seeing.
The craft in this film is exceptional. It's just exceptional.
I always love the juxtaposition that these characters are dealing with very complex emotional conundrums and predicaments, yet their language, their dialogue is so stilted and detached, and these people have these almost loving conversations, but the way they're delivered, you sit there going,
it's like a pseudo monotone kind of.
Do you hate each other? What is happening?
It's a puzzle box film, and they're always far more interesting. I don't necessarily think I loved it as much as I loved The Lobster, but I kind of flipped over it. I just had the best time. But I also love being made to feel fucking awful as well. I love watching people squirm in their seats. And people, like there were moments, and I remember in the screening we were at, because Charlie and I saw it at the Melbourne Film Festival, and people were gasping and yelling at the screen going, oh, I'm like, guys, like, come on, calm down.
There were a lot of people in that screening who did not enjoy it. And I feel like that'll be the same with a lot of people who see this. It's one of those films that will divide audiences. It's definitely not a conventional type of film. But God, if you go along for the ride, it's worth it.
But that's what makes Lanthimos's films exciting. And because of his reputation, is now able to bring in the kind of artists that, like a cast of this caliber.
And I'd also just like to add, like this is just a side note, Alicia Silverstone is in this film. And I'm not sure if it's my age or just the unexpected
the weirdest thing in the entire film.
But I got so excited when she popped up on screen.
Is she acting? Is she not acting? Like, it's so weird. It's the weirdest performance in the film. There's like, she's overacting. She's like Winona Ryder in Stranger Things. She's like, everything's happening with her face.
I was just sitting there going, oh my God, I'm so excited that she's here. But yeah, it was so unexpected for her to pop up. And she just plays they're all bizarre characters, but yeah, her presence is in keeping with that.
A lot of eye acting, lots of eye acting.
She's a small role, but she is there, and I was very and utterly excited.
Well, The Killing of a Sacred Deer is in cinemas now, and check out my full review at maketheswitch.com.au. Also out today is Blade of the Immortal. Jake grabbed his samurai sword and headed to the cinema, so was it legendary?
For his 100th film, Japanese Go auteur Takashi Miike returns The Blade of the Immortal, based on Hiroki Shimura's long-running manga series. Set in Japan during the mid-Tokugawa shogunate period, ageless badass Manji, Takuya Kimura of Japanese boy band SMAP, is living in a hut outside of a small village when he's approached by a young girl, Rin, after her parents are brutally murdered. The killer is Kagisa Anotsu, the head of a cadre of swordsmen called the Itoru Ryu, who is trying to unite all the schools of swordsmanship under his banner. Comparisons with another comic book adaptation, James Mangold's Logan, abound. Just like Wolverine, thanks to mystical bloodworms coursing through his veins, Manji can heal any wound and ages in slow motion. Living in self-imposed exile, he is covered in scars and weary of his immortality. Blade of the Immortal is also a gloriously violent film that maintains a wicked sense of humour as Manji engages in epic 1-against-100 battles, as well as individual fights with the Toyo Ryu assassins, all of whom have crazy costumes, personalities, and fighting styles. The only downside of a film that compresses the storyline of a 30-volume manga series published over 19 years is that several characters are given short shrift. It's a bummer to see an iconic actress like Chiaka Kiriyama, who plays Gogo Yubari from Kill Bill, in such a tiny cameo role. Blade of the Immortal is a hugely fun, gory fantasy action film. If this is the standard of Takashi Miike's cinematic output, 100 films into his career as a director, I hope he gets to make 100 more of them. 4 stars.
It's pretty remarkable to the idea of any director having 100 credits to their filmography, but he only started making
outside of the porn industry.
He only started making films in 1991. Like, think about that. This is a person who's been able to produce 100 films,
which is like 4 a year.
But looking through his back catalogue, like, he has some of the most famous and iconic Japanese films. Like, he's got Audition is one of, and Ishi the Killer was another. Like, he's not a slouch by any. The only film of Miike's that was his remake of Harakiri, which I saw a few years ago in 3D, and it was honestly one of the most beautiful films I'd seen in a long time. Like, breathtakingly beautiful.
Yeah.
His use of violence and his use of character psychology was so precise, which is embarrassing out of 100 films. It's the only one of his I've seen. But off that film alone, it makes any of his films exciting to me.
He's just like such a ridiculously like versatile filmmaker as well. Like, he's made everything from like kids films, like Ninja Kids, Yakuza films, cop movies like Shields of Straw. Now he's seems to be really into making historical samurai movies. So like 13 Assassins, Harakiri.
Well, I've always heard that 13 Assassins is one of the best samurai films in years. Like, I know people that just rave about it.
I love it. There's like a final battle scene in 13 Assassins that goes for about 7 hours. It's just like non-stop sword fighting and things exploding and, you know, cattle that's on fire, and it's just really good stuff. And it's like really well choreographed. But also, to be honest, like, you know, Miike's, he's made a lot of shit as well. So like he's made like a ton of bad movies. He like Blade of the Immortal. So that's like it's a manga adaptation. He's made manga adaptations before, like you know, Terra for Mars and a few other ones, and they've been pretty terrible. This is probably his first.
He can't keep it all up for 100 films.
Man, yeah. But like, I guess like out of 100 films, his strike rate is pretty good. And there's like a few, as you were saying before, there's like a few dead set classics in there. Like Audition is like a pretty classic, you know, horror movie. Ichi the Killer was, you know, in terms of the way it used, you know, comedy and extreme violence, pretty groundbreaking. Yeah, the guy's like an important filmmaker.
And he's only 57. Like, he's young by director standards. He's actually quite young.
He's really good friends with Quentin Tarantino as well. I remember seeing like a photo.
Well, Tarantino produced 13 Assassins, didn't he?
Yeah, and what else did he do? I think he had something to do with Miike did like a western called Sujaki Western Django. Which was just like this really bizarro western where all these non-English speaking Japanese actors say all their lines in English, and they probably don't actually understand what they're saying, so it comes off as kind of awkward. But I think Tarantino had something to do. Actually, Tarantino was in that. He actually played like a cowboy in that. So yeah, I don't know. Like, Takashi is probably, you know, 100 movies. I think his contribution to cinema maybe sort of puts him a little bit above Tarantino's to me, but they're obviously kind of like kindred spirits. So I don't know. It's kind of nice that they sort of, you know, they bro out in real life and, you know, sort of exchange ideas and talk about, you know, gory movies and whatnot.
Well, Miike sits there and just kind of nods pleasantly while Tarantino just yells at him, as Tarantino probably does with everybody.
Yeah, I can't really imagine sort of Miike getting too super hyped up and exuberant like Tarantino does. So, Imagine him sort of looking bemused as Tarantino like sort of foams over some sort of classic samurai movie or whatever, and it just kind of them as like a sort of like an odd couple duo just amuses me. So it's kind of cute.
It's your dream.
Anyway, you can find my full review at maketheswitch.com.au, and Blade of the Immortal is in cinemas now. Louis Theroux Heroin Town also hits cinemas tomorrow. It follows the British filmmaker to Huntington, West Virginia. Once a manufacturing hub in the Midwest, the city is now a Rust Belt town at the forefront of America's opioid crisis. While there, he talks to a few of the many heroin addicts in the town, as they tell their confronting stories. Many of them started out on legal drugs, prescribed by doctors to combat chronic pain. However, once access to these drugs were curtailed, these new addicts shifted to a much cheaper and readily accessible alternative: heroin. Louis also talks to emergency services personnel on the front line and former addicts who are now in recovery.
Huntington, West Virginia is a town of 49,000 people. Last year, we had over 1,100 overdoses.
At one point, I was making over at least over $200,000 a year.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Have you ever done rehab?
No, I haven't. Because, why would I?
If it wasn't for the drugs, this is not where I would be.
This documentary was originally filmed as a 1-hour episode of the 3-part BBC TV series, Louis Theroux Dark State, and has been expanded to justify a cinema release in Australia. To do this, the first 30 minutes of the documentary is a wide-ranging interview with Louis Theroux himself, which gives an in-depth look at his style, his history, background moments from some of his famous films, and explains what drew him towards the troubled city of Huntington.
So let me get this straight. The first 30 minutes of this film is about the filmmaker talking about himself. Wow, shocking. Look, I've only seen one Louis Theroux documentary before. It was his last one about Scientology, and I thought he took a very superficial approach, and I thought he was an ignorant and arrogant buffoon. He didn't accomplish anything with that film. So I have no interest in seeing any of his others, especially one where he deals with such a tough subject as heroin and addiction. But yeah, there you go. Big fan of his cousin, though.
Oh, yeah. Justin Theroux. I don't know, like Louis Theroux, I don't dislike him as much as you, but I actually watched Heroin Town, but I watched the Dark State version, so it only goes for 1 hour. It doesn't have the 30-minute interview with Louis Theroux where it explains, I guess, his motivation and context and whatever. But yeah, to me, Heroin Town never really delves into the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis like sort of spreads across the entire country. And obviously, like, it needs more than an hour and a half to really cover, but I don't think this really, like focusing on the one town, I don't think it ever really kind of represents the scale or, manages to sort of get into, how it affects the town itself. It's really just kind of like a series of, Louis Theroux talking to, one sort of scabby addict after another scabby addict. And
does he ever actually ask any of them why?
Yeah, he sort of like goes into it vaguely, but when you're talking to drug addicts as well, like it's never going to be the kind of revelatory truth that Louis Theroux is like really aiming for. Like, drug addicts sort of, they lie and they sort of skew information because they're, damaged people, obviously, who are hooked on drugs. So he never really gets that many good answers from these people. And if you're enraged by, Louis Theroux's arrogance, he actually asks one of his interview subjects at one stage, have you ever sucked a dick to get high? And this guy's like a former drug addict. And the guy replies, no, sir, I have not, but I have let a guy suck my dick to get high. And then Louis Theroux replies, so you do have some boundaries then? It's kind of said in this like really like dry way where you're like, is he like, putting some subtle shade on this guy? Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a very odd scene. Like when I saw it, I was just like, it's kind of amusing, but at the same time, it's like, should you really be looking down on your...
Laughing at
Yeah, exactly. Like sort of looking down on your interview subject, especially considering this guy is like a reformed heroin addict who's like, at the time, he's like sort of showing Louis Theroux around a tent camp on a dried riverbed where like all these like addicts go just to sort of shoot up drugs, away from this like small town. It's like a really just a really tricky documentary to endorse, considering it doesn't really break any new ground.
All right, now let's check out the upcoming films in our trailer wrap. Here's The Post.
This is a devastating security breach that was leaked out of the Pentagon. The most highly classified documents of the war.
The Times has 7,000 pages detailing how the White House has been lying about the Vietnam War for 30 years. The way they lied, those days have to be over.
Okay, people are concerned about having a woman in charge of the paper, that she doesn't have the resolve to make the tough choices.
Thank you, Arthur, for your frankness.
Let's do our jobs. Find those pages.
You're talking about exposing years of government secrets.
Is that legal?
What is it you think we do here for a living, kid?
Ben, I might have something.
It must be precious cargo.
It's just government secrets.
The New York Times was barred from publishing any more classified documents dealing with the Vietnam War.
If you publish, we'll be at the Supreme Court next week.
Meaning?
Well, we could all go to prison.
I just want to run a list by everyone in regards to the post. I'm just going to list a list of names. Alison Brie, Tom Hanks, Sarah Paulson, Bruce Greenwood, Meryl Streep, Jesse Plemons, Bradley Whitford, David Cross, the divine Carrie Coon, Michael Stuhlbarg, Zach Woods, Bob Odenkirk, Matthew Rhys, like Tracy Letts, all in a film directed by Steven Spielberg.
This is a very B-grade list, Daniel.
Never heard of any of them.
How dare you? I mean, the fact, like, the subject matter is enough. The inclusion of Spielberg working with historical material has always resulted in at least interesting films. But with a cast of that caliber, I didn't even need to see this trailer. And actually, to be honest, this isn't a very good trailer. It's not the most thrilling trailer, but the film's only, like, for Australians at least, it's barely 2 months away. So I don't care how bad the trailer's not great. It's got Carrie Coon in it, for fuck's sake. Like, I'm there. I'm fucking there. I've seen her I've seen both her and Spielberg in real life. Like, I'm totally there for this.
So Daniel's excited.
It's a Spielberg. And also, we get 2 Spielberg films in 3 months because Ready Player One comes out 2 months later. So
Yes. He's a boy.
You wash your mouth out.
I tried to read Ready Player One, and it was the rare book where I just went, like, life is too short. And I just tossed the book in the fireplace, and I never looked back. And a massive jet of, like, black smoke just rose from that fireplace and shot out of the chimney of my house. There was wailing of spirits, screeching. It was just it was a bad book.
But it's directed by Spielberg, so we'll just get innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Spielberg is okay. I'm a bit of a sucker for these, like, kind of journalistic, historical dealies. They're generally pretty interesting. Yeah, like especially when, like, the cast is, like, so talented.
This seems like a better Spotlight.
Yeah,
like not shit gonna make me yell at it for how fucking cowardly it is, Spotlight.
It's not such a great movie, but, like, because the story's, like, so juicy and stuff and the actors are so good, that kind of made Spotlight. So if the post actually has, like, Spielberg with some talent as well, maybe some interesting sort of shots and direction and stuff.
No direction. Like, Spotlight was devoid of direction. Both that'd be in cool. terms of the filmmaking and its intention.
But here we seem like we've got, hopefully Meryl Streep is kind of the lead in this particular film.
Yeah, she is. It's mostly about her.
Well, it seems like it's going to be very her and Tom Hanks, and it'll be nice to see a really, really strong female in this kind of Spielberg film. I think that in itself will make it really interesting to watch. Because, like, well, for one, who doesn't love a bit of Meryl Streep? But to kind of give conviction to this particular story, I think she's the kind of actor who is going to sell it.
And thank God this movie is coming out just in time, because I was getting worried. Like, she didn't have an Oscar-worthy film come out this year, so I was like...
Let's be honest, she hasn't had an Oscar-worthy film in a while, just because she gets nominated for... Like, let's not forget the woman got nominated for Into the Fucking Woods. They just throw a nomination at her because she was there. She'll turn up and they'll give her a nomination. This looks like she may have actually earned it.
Yeah, watch out. She's currently making the Mamma Mia sequel.
She'll probably get a fucking Oscar nomination for that too.
Yeah, probably at least a Golden Globe for Best Comedy or Musical.
Well, you can catch the post in Australian cinemas from the 11th of January 2018. Now let's...
I'll be there as soon as it comes out.
All right, now let's take a look at The Leisure Seeker.
Check it out, 75, Winnebago Indian.
I named it the Leisure Seeker. We've had a lot of wonderful trips in this old rust bucket. I'm finally taking John to see Hemingway's house in Key West. Kids, we won't be gone long.
You know that Dad can't drive in his condition.
Where are we? We're not home.
No, hon. This is Pennsylvania.
What the dickens are we doing in Pennsylvania?
This is just something I really need to do with your father.
My husband suffers from memory loss, and I'm afraid he might just wander off and get hurt.
John!
Where's Ella?
I'm here, John.
Is that really you?
Who are you?
John.
My John is charming, educated. You stole him from me, and I want you to give him back.
Whoever stole him from you stole him from me, too.
The Leisure Seeker is directed by Paolo Verrizzi, who is Italian, And that is all I really know about him. I haven't seen any of his many films. He has like quite a few films, none of which I've seen. But I do know that this movie stars Donald Sutherland and Helen Mirren. And that's a pretty good combination. Like, Donald Sutherland is one of my favorite actors. Helen Mirren is one of the most reliable British actresses. That's a pretty good combination. That's like sort of my interest in the movie is like seriously just because that casting is those are two pretty awesome leads, I think.
Donald Sutherland is pretty dependable in everything he does.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he doesn't do very much. Like, I think through the last films that I remember seeing him in, he's fabulous in the Hunger Game films. Like, he's just deliciously good. And he's so good in Pride and Prejudice. And just watching this trailer, like, I love Helen Mirren, but I went, I'm here to watch Donald Sutherland. I just, to see him on screen is very, very exciting again.
But those two playing off each other, it looks really sweet.
Yeah. Donald Sutherland's one of those guys who's just kind of like a really good, kind of like I was saying about Harry Dean Stanton before, like he's like a really good face actor. So, like, Donald Sutherland, a lot of time, he sort of doesn't really do that much, but he is just such an interesting guy to watch.
And having a good face is very useful in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because he needs to use it at one point.
Yeah, totally. And like by a good face, I just mean like a super interesting face, like, you know, like ugly almost, but, you know, fascinatingly. So, Helen Mirren, not so ugly, actually pretty hot. Just a good actress.
Donald Sutherland gives good face.
Unfortunately, though, this film has got a pretty bad score on Metascore. It's only sitting at 55. That's only 6 reviews, but the trailer looks great. Let's just pray with the trailer.
For the cast, including Helen Mirren and Donald Sutherland, it'll at least be an interesting watch, if nothing too exceptional. But I'm hoping it's kind of going to be a road trip movie to not remember from the look of it. So.
Oh dear, Charlie, you really you were saving that one, weren't you?
I was. The Leisure Seeker will be in Australian cinemas sometime in 2018. And finally, let's take a look at Game Night.
Tonight, we're taking Game Night up a notch.
Oh boy.
Someone in this room is going to be taken, and it's going to be up to you to find them.
It's a murder mystery party.
Whoever finds the victim wins the grand prize. You're not gonna know what's real and what's fake. Wait a sec, you can't just come in here and break the door. Oh!
Looks so real.
Party, asshole!
Help me, please.
Guys, make sure you get a piece of this cheese. It's just the first one that follows us gets shot. Okay, roger that. You drive safe.
It's not a joke. You people are in real danger.
Is this gun real?
Oh no, Annie.
Blood!
So essentially, this looks like the David Fincher film The Game, but as a comedy. I have no issues with that whatsoever. It looks like such a Jason Bateman film, and I absolutely and utterly love Rachel McAdams. So seeing her again flex her comedic skills, Mean Girls, whoop, gets me very excited. This looks hilarious, and that one scene in the trailer where where the guy gets sucked into the jet engine makes me very excited.
This looks fucking great. I'm with Jess. I watched this trailer and I was with it. I mean, the cast is wonderful. It looks like a bunch of fun, and it does seem like... It looks like someone took It's a Mad, 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 Mad World and The Game and just shoved them together and went, what's going to happen if we do this? And I'm totally there for both those things.
And speaking of our favourite movie, Into the Woods, it's got Billy Magnussen in it.
And I hope he takes his shirt off, because that is his prerogative in every film.
It's contractual obligation.
Also, I'd like to see him play a character one day, though, that isn't dumb, because he's always the dumb person.
It's because someone that pretty can't have brains as well.
Well, I'm sure maybe he does. Oh, no, he's in Bridge of Spies, and he plays someone intelligent in Bridge of Spies. There we go. Thank you, Spielberg.
But he doesn't take his shirt off in Bridge of Spies. So.
But he doesn't take his shirt off, but that's okay, because it's a Spielberg film, and that would be weird. We don't go to watch Spielberg films to be turned on.
We don't?
Well, maybe I do when I watch them, but it's fine.
I don't know. Tom Hanks does it for me.
Game Night also seems to be based on an Agatha Christie novel. According to the internet. The internet is telling me Game Night is based on And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie.
Oh, the internet says so.
What?
It's continuing to build the Agatha Christie extended universe. Oh my God, Perot's going to turn up in this one. Branner's in it. I bet you Branner's in it. Oh my God.
I don't remember anyone getting sucked into a jet engine and then there were none. That's a new it's a
subtext.
I'm sure people don't remember Murder on the Orient Express being as that boring. So, there are changes that can be made.
I think Agatha Christie is like the new Stephen King. Or the old Stephen King.
Yeah, right?
But as long as Bran is in every single one, that's what's important.
No, not Brenner, the moustache.
As you said last week, Jess, the moustache enters the room before he does.
Well, hey, I'm all up for more Agatha Christie, and you can catch Game Night in Australian cinemas from the 1st of March 2018, and to check out all these trailers and more, head to youtube.com/MakeTheSwitchAU.
Amidst the praise being directed at Thor Ragnarok, actor Tessa Thompson revealed that she played her character Valkyrie as bisexual. Marvel then confirmed that a scene that makes this more obvious was actually cut from the film. Marvel seemed to think it deserved kudos for including a queer superhero character, but does it? Does revealing this character information after the fact earn them the points for representation, or is this piecemeal offering actually more insulting when you can't even see this in the final film, especially when Disney have already been woefully guilty of this in the past 12 months?
Okay, I'm just going to throw this out there. There's this place called China, and China is the second biggest film market in the world at the moment. China is notoriously scrupulous with the amount of foreign films it lets into its theaters annually. It only lets in 34 films per year, and its censors go over each one rigorously for stuff that is against the overall moral values pushed by the Chinese government. China is not cool with LGBTQ stuff in general. It's not a very gay-friendly country, especially in terms of the media. So Marvel's movies get about 35-40% of their box office from China. And Marvel movies haven't included any gay characters yet. I'm not saying there's any kind of correlation between the fact that Marvel doesn't include gay characters in its films and the fact that it's running a multi-billion-dollar business. But I don't know. It just kind of seems to me that maybe a little bit of a coincidence there. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, let me start with a couple of figures because we do have some figures from China.
Yep.
So as of last week, it had made up $56 million. So after being open 1 week in China, $56 million for the entire $354 million that it had taken in foreign earnings. And that's not including the past week in which it will have grown even further as a portion of that. So Jake's not wrong when he says that there are sensitivities that have to be obliged when it comes to China.
I kind of think you have a point. I think that probably has a lot to do with it. I think the issue, though, with the way that Marvel handled this is it's the same thing that happened with Beauty and the Beast, where they kept going on about LeFou being the first gay character in a Disney film, and you honestly couldn't even blink and you'd miss it because it was so tiny and so inconsequential. And in this particular case, this thing of you're revealing this after the fact. Well, whoop-de-fucking-do. That's great. That's good on you. Pat yourselves on the back for basically doing jack shit. I respect Tessa Thompson as an actor tremendously, and I believe her. In fact, when she said that, I went, okay, I can kind of see that in the film. But then Marvel kind of congratulating themselves on representation and Disney congratulating themselves on representation is kind of bullshit. I would kind of prefer if the reason they can't put an LGBTIQ plus character in a Marvel film or a Star Wars film or a Disney film, if the reason they can't do that is because they're worried about the Chinese market, fine. Then don't afterwards go, oh, but we kind of did. If you look really hard, if you really pay attention, but isn't that great? Isn't that great for representation? And it's well, fuck you. I felt so insulted by what they did with Beauty and the Beast. As a member of the LGBTIQ plus community, I was so angry. Either do it or don't. If you don't do it, it's much better than half-ass doing it because it's actually kind of saying we're pathetic enough to take whatever you throw at us.
When I watch Marvel films and TV series, I don't actually see any of these superheroes as sexual characters.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't see them as gay or straight. I kind of see them as this sort of higher purpose. They're so hindered by their sort of moral duty that gay, straight, bi, what have you, it just doesn't even factor in at all, despite the fact that they're being played by very sexy actors.
I'd normally agree with you, Jess, but in this instance, I would actually say that there was if anything, more flirtation between Thor and Valkyrie in this film than there were of any hints of bisexuality of that character. Like, I don't really understand how anyone could even vaguely claim that it was bisexual, the performance in any sort of way. And that's what irks me. That, you know, you can say something like that, but how are you actually portraying it? If anyone has any inklings of how that is the case, then please speak up. But I'm personally never felt that at all from this particular character.
Well, the film doesn't offer it. The film doesn't offer it as a possibility. And to be honest, it is so inconsequential to the film that you go, well, saying it afterwards doesn't really mean anything. I mean, this is all just... like, Marvel's not great with I mean, we can say, yes, there's a film like Black Panther coming out, which is very exciting, but we still don't have a lead female superhero. I mean, it's many years away.
Captain Marvel's on its way.
But it's many years away, and they're already, like, they're behind the ball with DC, for fuck's sake. For young African-American kids, it's going to be such a big deal to see Black Panther and see them represented on screen as superheroes. The same, you know, young girls, we know that from Wonder Woman it meant such a big deal. Wouldn't it make an enormous deal for a young LGBTIQ plus person to see someone from their community represented on screen?
There's actually a big difference between something like a film such as Black Panther and including a queer character. And that difference is actually, unfortunately, it's not about representation for Marvel. It's about box office dollars. They know there is an African-American audience in America who, and this is proven with studies, they will not go and see films which do not have African-American characters. So they know that it's a market that they can target. Whereas if you're talking about an LGBTQ audience, they're less likely to not see a film because there's not a queer character in it.
Oh, totally.
So the issue here is, in the end, money. They're not making Black Panther because they're a really nice company and they think that representation is awesome and that equality for all. They want to make big bucks out of this. That's all it comes down to.
I completely agree with you. The flip side of that is that Marvel have spent years saying, until Captain Marvel has spent years saying, you know, oh, well, you know, female-led superhero films don't make money, and now Wonder Woman is the most successful superhero film of all time. So realistically, I completely agree with you, and I think that they probably could just afford to, I don't know, take a risk, which is obviously a very strange concept for Marvel.
Well, they had Patty Jenkins. Like Marvel had Patty Jenkins directing Thor 2, so... Like Thor: The Dark World was originally supposed to be directed by Patty Jenkins, who...
Really? Was it Patty Jenkins?
Yeah. Sorry, that's when Natalie Portman signed up because Patty Jenkins was on board. And then Patty Jenkins bailed for whatever reason. And I guess Thor 2 was a bit of a flop. And Patty Jenkins went across to DC and created this massive thing.
Well, who's laughing now?
Yeah, exactly.
See, I hate how they come out and say, oh, female-led superhero films don't make any bank. But they're basing this on what? There haven't been any.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, as an example.
Exactly.
So what the fuck are they talking about?
They're basing it on things that men in Hollywood say, and we all know how that turns out. So.
Well, that sounds like a good segue for our next topic, doesn't it?
Yes, moving on. Well, the hits just keep on coming in the wake of the Hollywood sexual assault scandal. Oscar winner Kevin Spacey is the latest to crumble beneath the avalanche of accusations, with Netflix not only cutting ties with the actor, but also cancelling the highly popular series House of Cards. Further to this, just 5 weeks out from release, Ridley Scott has made the extreme decision to replace Spacey from his latest film, All the Money in the World, with fellow Oscar winner Christopher Plummer. This last-minute scramble is a huge gamble for the film as it enters awards season, which makes us reflect on the other films that have made such dramatic 11th-hour changes.
Well, the most recent example of something where a film's had to have that kind of overhaul, I mean, it wasn't an actor, it was a director, but like the Han Solo film, having halfway through filming changing director is probably the most comparable thing I can think of.
Same with Justice League. They were in post-production when Snyder had to leave and was replaced by Joss Whedon.
Yes. There's the really great example of David Fincher having to replace Nicole Kidman with Jodie Foster in Panic Room. Because of Nicole Kidman still suffering from injuries from Moulin Rouge. And they'd actually been filming for quite a few weeks at that particular point. I can think of many examples where actors have had to change because the actor wasn't quite right, or the actor was injured, or the actor had family issues come up. but basically to wipe the actor from the film completely because of something like this is pretty unprecedented.
The most infamous story in Hollywood of actor replacement would have to be Eric Stoltz, who was several weeks into filming Back to the Future when he was replaced because he just wasn't working, and they replaced him with Michael J. Fox, who was actually originally approached to play Marty McFly, but he couldn't do it due to his family ties commitments. And when Eric Stoltz didn't work out, they managed to work around it, and poor Matthew Fox was pulling double duty and like 30-hour days doing Family Ties and Back to the Future at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to chuck in a couple of comic book related ones. Doug Ray Scott being replaced in the role of Wolverine by Hugh Jackman just because of clashes with the scheduling for Mission Impossible 2. I mean, that's kind of a classic just because Mission Impossible 2 was a massive stink bomb of a movie. And Wolverine went on to Hugh Jackman in Wolverine. That was just like a, megastar making role. So that one's got a sting. And when I just remember then, because I'm going through this like period now, I'm kind of really into Sean Young movies.
Sean Young movies?
Dune era. Yeah, young Sean Young is pretty damn good. But she was supposed to be Vicky Vale in Batman, Tim Burton's Batman. But she broke a leg in a horse riding accident and got replaced by Kim Basinger. Once again, that sort of turned into like a star-making role for Kim Basinger.
There's a part 2 to this discussion that I'd like to introduce. With this replacement of Kevin Spacey with Christopher Plummer, it also begs the question, if you could erase any actor from a film, who would it be and why? I'm going to kick this off. This is not a reflection of the actor himself. I just feel that he was just grossly miscast. It was the Christopher Nolan film Insomnia. Back in, was it 2002?
God,
I felt that Robin Williams was grossly miscast.
No, he's brilliant. It's one of his best performances.
Daniel, hush. Earlier that year, he'd come out with the brilliant film 1 Hour Photo, in which he played a similarly mentally disturbed character. And I thought he was brilliant in it. And then he backed it up with Insomnia, and I just don't think he clicked. I have no idea who I would replace him with, but it didn't work for me. I'm sorry.
You're forgiven. I'm very upset, but you're forgiven.
I'm sorry. I love Robin Williams. Like, you have no idea. It's not a reflection on him. I just don't think he suited that role. Okay, Charlie, you want to chime in here?
Sure. I think one of the greatest travesties of the early 2000s was the film adaptation of A Series of Unfortunate Events.
Oh, I would just throwing darts at my heart now.
And I would definitely love to wipe the face of Jim Carrey out of that.
That's
film.
His best performance. What are you talking about?
No.
He's iconic.
No.
Oh,
no.
He's a crazy character.
That film is tripe. They ruined the books.
Fucking brilliant film. Wrong.
You're fucking
Who
wrong.
could have played that besides Jim Carrey? I mean, I know that Neil Patrick Harris plays it now in the series.
Plays is a really vague term for what he does in that film.
I haven't seen it, so I can't comment.
So
but
bad.
I just know. I'm just stating
I don't know.
fact here.
I thought of some very obscure choices. I actually thought Kelsey Grammer could be quite fun in that role. Or someone like Ben Kingsley, perhaps. But honestly, it was like a low point of Jim Carrey, his whole career for me. I just cannot stand him in that particular film. Wow. And honestly, think there were many, many bigger issues with that film than just Jim Carrey. But fuck me, he was atrocious.
Okay, Daniel, you may speak.
Now that I'm in the process of recovering. I mean, if I had to choose one personally that I would want to see replaced, I'd want to replace Ralph Fiennes as Voldemort in the Harry Potter films. I think he was woefully miscast. I actually think he is a serious detriment to those films. His performance is so off. It is not on point. He's too young. Wow. Like, his performance is too big. It is devoid of menace. It makes the films feel like Shakespearean and operatic and stupid. He just spends the entire time moving his hands around and whispering everything. I remember watching him in The Goblet of Fire and going, what the fuck are you doing? Oh, it was over the top and I hated it. I really don't like Ralph Fiennes. And I love Ralph Fiennes.
Brain exploding emoji.
Oh, no. I think I would have cast someone about 15 years older, and I would have cast someone who was more menacing. Someone who could actually scare the shit out of me. He doesn't scare me. I just look at him and go, oh, you look like a fucking cartoon villain with a fucking mask on. Yeah, no.
Okay, Jake?
Okay, so I am like a pretty massive Woody Allen fan. But I recognize the fact that he is a really weird-looking old man who hooks up with pretty hot chicks in his movies, which, as much as a fan as I am of his writing, is kind of gross to watch. So I'm going to say, like, Woody Allen is the actor I'd erase, and the film is every Woody Allen film from 1995 onwards.
You are our fucking hero, Jake.
From Mighty Aphrodite onwards, I think if you recast Woody Allen's roles as a romantic lead in all those movies would be fucking, wow, they'd be amazing.
So not so much taking an eraser to these films as like setting light to them.
Man, just like sort of put Christopher Plummer in all those movies. I would rather watch Christopher Plummer make out with like Mira Sorvino in Mighty Aphrodite than little Woody Allen.
That's the most brilliant response I could have ever hoped for. You are literally a hero. Thank you, Jake. You've made up for how fucking horrible Jess's and Charlie's were.
Okay, once again, complete tonal shift. To celebrate the release of Atomic Blonde on home entertainment, myself and some of my fellow media folk were invited to attend Atomic Spy School. There, we were privileged to be instructed in the ways of espionage by former Australian Secret Intelligence Service and MI6 trained spy Warren Reed. Here's how it all went down.
Someone set me up. Someone from the inside.
Lorraine, there's a double agent hunting our operatives in Berlin. Your mission, find out who did this. Remember, trust no one.
Warren, if that is your real name, pleasure to meet you.
As far as I know it is, yeah.
Okay, so you did a talk before to a bunch of journos here, and one of the things that blew my mind about when you're talking about the spy world is that you emphasize the importance of emotional intelligence over intellectual intelligence. So that kind of breaks a lot of the stigma that we find in spy films. In regards to that, would you say that women make better spies than men?
Oh, it's a clear-cut question, but you can't say yes, women are generally or overwhelmingly better. A man or a woman often has a different skill set, often coming from instincts, famous women's intuition. When women are good at it, in some circumstances where a man might not have performed that well, a woman sometimes will just shine. She might be a wreck after the whole thing. You say, how did you just sail through that? I mean, you didn't give any hint that you knew what was coming on. Brilliant. And so, well, I've always been able to do that, but it's so draining. And she might go off and go to bed at 3 o'clock and sleep right through till tomorrow morning. But to be able to perform at the time, a woman can often bring a skill set that largely is something most blokes won't be equipped with.
Well, speaking of females and female spies, we're here to talk about Atomic Blonde. Do you enjoy spy movies?
When I was a teenager, I loved James Bond movies because they were more exciting than other movies. But they're all, very false. And I didn't have to be a full adult to be able to assume that spy's life wouldn't be like James Bond. But Atomic Blonde is a very different generation of spy movie. I mean, firstly, James Bond was always demeaning women by treating them as dolls and playthings, mainly for sex. And if there was a Russian spy, lady spy or something in a James Bond movie, she was awfully clever, but he still got into her knickers, And so Atomic Blonde, I mean, there's a lot going on in it, but the biggest thing it does is to highlight how, particularly with Lorraine, as the main character, that she's contending with lots of things happening on different planes all at the same time without even knowing who she can trust, who's working for whom, and is that plane up there linked to this one down here? I mean, that's more like what spying's like, which is nothing like the James Bond movies. And you have a woman doing it at an incredibly stressful level in the spying game.
So would you say that Atomic Blonde is the film that's gotten the most right?
There are a number of movies and documentaries, like we saw the Spook series on TV, made in England. Lots of the things that are being made nowadays are more realistic, and they often get former spies to help out, and say, if we had a scenario like this, how would you set it up? Who would do what to whom? But, it's all there in Atomic Blonde. And you can't mention Atomic Blonde unless you look at the time it's set. It's just before the downfall of the Soviet Union and before the Berlin Wall came down. It's still the Cold War days. But it was basically the East and the world, the democratic free world and the communist world. And there were lots of tensions there. That's when I was mainly in it. So I could identify with that, particularly in Berlin at that time. And you've got treachery inside the service she's purportedly working for, MI6. And, lives are at stake. And she handles all of this in her own way. She no sooner digests one thing than, boom, something blows up on another level, and she's got to suddenly swing her attention around to that. And so the movies were very realistic. Always in movies, you get a few extra people are killed and whatnot. It'll be a bit more brutal than the daily life of a spy. But if you look at any spy who's been in it for 10 or 20 years, they'll have come up with a number of scenarios that really tested them, where people got killed and they were lucky to get out alive. So it portrays it. And the biggest thing is it's real and it's nothing like a James Bond movie.
So have you ever had to change your appearance for a mission?
Oh, well, disguises have always been there in intelligence. Nowadays, not used that much, but the CIA have been very big on that. They've had some brilliant disguise experts working for them, and they've sometimes had to go into countries when there's a revolution or something on, and say Americans or whoever have been tracked, and they'll go in as a disguise expert, sneak into the country with a false identity, and teach them how to be somebody totally different. They're all part of a film crew, or they're bird experts going to study a migratory pattern that happens in that country, give them a whole new identity. Papers, passports, visas, everything meticulously done, and then train those people in a matter of days, if they've got the time, or a week, in the cover stories they all have. And then they sail through the airport and get out. So, God, how do we do that? All because the bloke disguised them. And the disguise experts know, like going through an international airport where you go through immigration, you've got the customs people, there are lots of people looking through CCTV. A disguise expert knows that if you're going to smuggle someone into or out of a country with a totally false identity, they know which key features to change in the disguise. And it's quite an exhilarating thing. It's incredibly detailed. It's just like an actor on the stage. I've never been a stage actor. But I would assume they slip into the character role. And a lot of people now in biographical movies, like Nelson Mandela or Maggie Thatcher or something like that, Winston Churchill, they take on all the mannerisms. They watch a lot of film and video footage of the person and pick up their idiosyncrasies. And it's just amazing in movies. Disguise in intelligence isn't that far removed from what movie makers do.
Warren Reed, former ACES officer, thank you very much for talking to me.
Good job.
Atomic Blonde is out now on 4K Ultra HD, Blu-ray, DVD, and digital, and we're giving you the chance to win a copy of your very own. We have 5 copies of the action spy thriller up for grabs on Blu-ray. Catch Charlize Theron as the kick-ass MI6 agent as she investigates the murder of a colleague while dealing with deadly double agents.
We're also giving away 10 double passes to see The Butterfly Tree in cinemas. Starring Melissa George, Ed Oxenbould, and Ewan Leslie, it tells the story of an imaginative teenager, Finn, who's mourning the loss of his mother. He meets Evelyn, a former showgirl and the new owner of the local flower shop, and is drawn into her exotic, glamorous world. But things get complicated when it turns out Finn's dad, Al, also has feelings for Evelyn. Uh-oh.
And speaking of Finns, we also have 5 copies of Sharknado 5 up for grabs. As shark-infested storms grow stronger and more complex, the world braces itself for the inevitable, a global Sharknado. This year, the mission gets personal for chainsaw-wielding leader Finn Shepard and his bionic wife April when their young son gets trapped in a Sharknado and is transported around the world.
I have never seen any of these films. The lead character is actually called Finn?
Yeah.
That's the best ever.
I've only seen the first one, but there are things in that film that you need to see for yourself. Finally, we're giving away a complete change of tone. We're giving away 5 copies of an inconvenient sequel, Truth to Power. A decade after An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore returns to our screens with a renewed message on the perils of climate change and how they can be overcome with human ingenuity and passion. For your chance to win this and all our giveaways, head to maketheswitch.com.au/comps now.
And before we go, we'd love to offer you some cinematic inspiration, with each of us suggesting one film. Hear that, everybody? One film that you should see this week and why. For me, it is an absolute no-brainer, us having talked about The Killing of a Sacred Deer. My film this week is The Lobster, Yorgos Lanthimos' previous film from 2015. Oh my goodness, if I can even try to encapsulate this plot in 30 seconds or less is just insanity. So this film also stars Colin Farrell. He's in this bizarre world where essentially you turn up to this hotel and you try and find yourself a romantic partner. And if you can't find yourself a romantic partner within 45 days, you get turned into an animal. So that's the first half of the film. The second half of the film is him escaping the hotel and going and meeting this band of rebels out in the wild. Honestly, it's such a freaking weird film, but in the same vein as The Killing of a Sacred Deer, it is just this phenomenal piece of art. And it is art. It's not your typical film. It is something so quirky, so unusual, but at the same time also so beautifully shot and so obnoxiously creative. This whole idea of this world is just utterly nuts.
Yes. yes, it is.
Okay. I saw it at the Golden Age cinema in Sydney, and it was awesome. It was awesome watching The Lobster in like a tiny little cinema with a bunch of people who didn't really know what to expect. And just seeing that the crowd kind of ripple. It's a really funny movie. Something funny happens. Then it like switches and it's like really kind of grim. You can hear kind of everyone, inhale and it's like, oh my God. And just towards the end, everyone is going, what the fuck? Like, what is, what is the ending?
It's one of those rare examples of a film that's actually completely and utterly original. There's just nothing like it.
Yeah, entirely so.
I saw this film at my in-laws' house over Christmas about 2 years ago, where there were like 50 family members in the house and all the parents were outside getting smashed and all the kids were inside watching The Lobster at my recommendation. But all the parents kept coming in and out of the house, obviously to get more drinks or go to the bathroom, and they'd sort of stop, watch about 5 minutes of this film, turn to us and go, fuck are you guys watching? And we sort of turn to them and go, even we don't know. And it was just so funny watching these people's reaction. Like every couple of minutes, someone would walk into the house and they'd always have the same reaction to what was on the screen. That cracked me up. It made the experience so much more enjoyable.
It's one of those films you just simply cannot define.
No, you have to see it to believe it.
You've really got to experience The Lobster for yourself. Check it out. Jessica, what about you for this week?
My film is from 2007. It's just one of the most gorgeous indie films by a brilliant and sadly she's passed on filmmaker called Adrienne Shelley. Oof. I thought it was one of those under the radar little gems called Waitress, but it's actually recently in the last year become a hit Broadway musical. So this film stars Carrie Russell, and she's a small town waitress at a diner at a pie restaurant, and she specializes in making pies. It's her one true joy in life. She's actually married to quite an abusive man, and she ends up falling pregnant accidentally to her husband, and she goes to the doctor, and her doctor is played by the fabulous Nathan Fillion, and they end up having an affair. And so she sort of discovers what love is and what it's like to have someone to talk to while she's growing this unwanted child in her belly, and she's trying to get enough money to enter a pie making competition and eventually leave her husband. This is it is a comedy, it is a drama, it is a romance, and it's so beautiful. Do not watch this film hungry, I should point out. It features some of the most incredible baking you've ever seen in your life. It is a really beautiful, beautiful, heartwarming film, and if you watch it and if you love it, which I hope you do, afterwards just look up the filmmaker Adrienne Shelley. She tragically passed away in a particularly horrific way after making this film. She didn't actually see its completion. There were a couple of scripts of hers that were produced afterwards, and it's a really, really, really beautiful film, and I hope everyone goes out and sees Waitress.
Okay, good recommendation. Daniel, what have you got in store for us this week?
I'm following on from talking about Ridley Scott earlier, and I'm going to recommend his director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, his epic recreation of the 12th Century Crusades. The theatrical version is completely forgettable, ignore it, but the director's cut is rightly regarded as one of his finest films.
That has like an intermission, doesn't it? It's got like it has like a midway.
Yeah, it's 3 hours in length in total, but it's a completely different film.
I never saw the original, but I saw the director's cut, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Kingdom of Heaven was like it didn't get such a great rap when it first came out the movies.
It was essentially gutted by the studio because they wanted an action adventure film, and what he delivered was a very deep meditation on the Crusades and the relationship between the Crusaders and the Muslims, and it's a very evenly balanced, very sad and melancholy film, and I honestly think it's one of the best things he's ever made. But it has to be the director's cut. The director's cut is a completely different film to the very forgettable theatrical cut.
Alrighty, and for you, Jake, what have you got in store for us this week?
I mentioned a movie earlier for my review for Lucky, The Trees Lounge by Steve Buscemi. It's a 1996 dark comedy drama. It's written, directed, and it stars Steve Buscemi. Yeah, it's just like Steve Buscemi plays like an alcoholic wit who hangs out at a bar a lot and antagonizes his fellow barflies. It's got Anthony Palia, Samuel Jackson. Chloe Savini plays his love interest. Just a really cool mid-90s, weird outsider, dwelling on the fringes of American society style movie. And the humor in it is like sort of so dark. It influenced David Chase when he was writing Sopranos, and he eventually kind of brought Steve Buscemi into the Sopranos fold as a character and also a director for a few episodes. So if you can find it, Trees Lounge, it's a good one.
Well, some fantastic suggestions there, and you can find the links to all the articles we've talked about on this week's podcast at maketheswitch.com.au. Please subscribe to SWITCHCast on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to rate us and stay in touch on Twitter. I'm at Charlie_David. Jess?
I'm at Miss Jess _Switch.
Daniel?
At Daniel Lamon.
And Jake?
At Jake Chatty.
Like it, follow it. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Make the Switch AU to stay up to date with all the latest reviews, news, trailers, and giveaways.
And you can find all the notes and links to everything we've discussed on this week's podcast, as well as other episodes by visiting switchcast.com.au.
On next week's show, I'll have my verdict on the pretty damn beautiful Australian film The Butterfly Tree, and speak to the director Priscilla Cameron about her decade-long endeavour to bring it to life.
I take a look at the A.A. Milne biopic Goodbye Christopher Robin.
And I'll check out the disturbing Christmas horror comedy Better Watch Out.
Plus, we'll have our review on Alicia Vikander and Dane DeHaan's romantic drama Tulip Fever. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you all next week.